Fans were shocked when Frank Fritz was fired from American Pickers in March 2020. However, that was only a light drizzle before the big storm hit. In September 2024, the collector's world was rocked by news of his death. It broke my heart that he died, but that wasn't even the most shocking thing. The rumors about Frank's last words gave everyone who heard them chills. And just when everyone thought the shock couldn't get any worse, his estate told them something so shocking that no one could say anything. But before we talk about the shocking findings, let's remember one of the world's most dedicated collectors. You see, Frank Fritz was born on October 11, 1963, in Davenport, Iowa. He was naturally curious, which made him stand out. Frank was interested in history when most kids his age were after fly balls and the newest comic books. He was interested in anything that had a story, no matter how small or unimportant it seemed. There were old coins, rusty beer cans, used stamps, and even razor blades that were no longer helpful. He thought that everything had a history, a reason for being here, and a place in someone's life before it came here. He wanted to know everything about it. His love for it grew as he did. The collectibles he used to carry around with him got bigger. There were old motorcycles, dirt bikes, and rare items that were worn down but held a lot of history. He used flea markets as a battlefield. He sells his yard. Frank would be the first person to knock on the door of any old barn off a forgotten highway that was full of old things. He was ready to dig through the dust. Most people thought it was just a weird hobby. It was a calling for Frank. But this is where things went in a strange direction. The man didn't jump right into the world of old things. Life pulled him in a different direction instead, and he did that job in Iowa for almost 25 years. The job was very serious and needed accuracy, attention to detail, and a strong desire to keep people safe. But his love for collecting never went away, no matter how much time he spent checking fire rules and inspecting buildings. In fact, his job made things worse. He went into old firehouses, factories that were empty, and other forgotten buildings every day. There are places full of secret gems that are just waiting for someone like him to find them and show them to the world. Now, he was collecting things related to fire stations. There were leather helmets that were stained with soot, old fire alarms that used to sound through the chaos, and fire extinguishers that had been through a lot. Frank went after all of them. Not long after, he realized he was onto something bigger than just a collector's item. Not only were these artifacts interesting, they were also valuable. He began to buy things and slowly turned his hobby into a side business. Soon enough, the thought of making his hobby his job began to creep in. He had a steady job for years at this point, but he knew where his heart was. Deep down. It wasn't easy for him to quit a stable job, but his real passion was stronger. He decided to jump. He looked through Frank's Things. It's a small antique store that focuses on firefighter tools and unique items. It was just a small step towards something new at first. But he didn't know that that little store would be the start of a job that would soon take him on a journey of finding treasure and becoming famous in a way he never thought possible. A lot of people knew Frank Fritz before American Pickers. He was just a guy who liked to look for hidden riches and enjoy the thrill of the hunt. But Frank wasn't the only one who felt this way. Mike Wolf, who was also from Iowa, was also obsessed with the same thing. They weren't best friends at first, but over time their love of picking brought them together. Mike saw the big picture. He thought of picking as more than a fun thing to do. It was a way of life that could grow into something huge. Frank was happy running his store, Frank's Finds. Mike was busy filming his treasure-finding trips and trying to get people to agree to be on his TV show. Frank finally agreed after being persuaded for a while. It began with two guys hitting the road to find lost artifacts, but it quickly became a huge hit on reality TV. The first episode of American Pickers on the History Channel in 2010 was a huge hit. The first episode was seen by over 3.1 million people, making it one of the most popular network's first shows ever. However, the show's magic wasn't just in the old things. It was in the way Mike and Frank got along. There was nothing fake about their excitement, and their friendship was real. They had been making friends in the secondhand world for years, and people respected them for being honest and knowing a lot. Now that the cameras were going, they were letting people join in the fun. Mike was good at business and was always on the lookout for the next big thing. Frank, on the other hand, was the main person behind everything. He could put people at ease, changing tense talks into friendly chats. It wasn't just about the money for him. He was really interested in the stories behind the things they found. That he was real made him a fan favorite. People saw someone who loved what he did, whether he was getting excited about an old motorcycle or making a seller laugh. American Pickers was a must-see for more than 10 years. Frank and Mike went on the road every week, going through junkyards, barns, and garages to find hidden riches. Danielle Colby was in charge at Antique Archaeology, so the three of them worked well together. They were more than just business partners. They were also friends who shared a love. One car trip can end, though, and Frank's journey, which at first seemed never-ending, went in a direction no one saw coming. The first signs that something wasn't right with American Pickers didn't make people worry right away. Frank Fritz's last show was in March 2020, but most fans thought he'd be back soon because the world was so unpredictable at the time. They didn't know that Frank was having a lot of problems behind the scenes that would change everything in the end. Even though Frank Fritz didn't talk much about his problems, they got too big to ignore over time. Fans have seen his weight go up and down for years. Some people thought it was just getting older. Some people were scared that something was wrong. Frank finally told them that he had Crohn's disease, a long-term illness that affects the gut system. It hurts, is hard to plan for, and wears you out. Frank first tried to deal with it by following a strict diet, which helped him lose 65 pounds. You can't just get rid of Crohn's, though. Every day you have to fight it. He was always in pain, tired and worried, but he never let that stop him from doing what he loved. He was stressed for other reasons as well as his health. Fame changes everything. And it wasn't always good for Frank. Things got a lot harder after American Pickers became popular. He wasn't just a guy looking for old things anymore. He was at the top of reality TV. People knew who he was and expected him to be the funny, smart guy they saw on TV everywhere he went. They didn't see the stress that came with it, though. Frank said that being in the public eye made him nervous, and that it got worse over time. But things really went wrong in 2020. Frank's health got so bad that he had to have major back surgery, which wasn't a small operation. There were 185 stitches and 2 rods in his back, and it will take months for him to heal. Besides that, he was also fighting his own demons, such as addiction. At first, his departure seemed like a short break that would help him heal and get back on his feet. But as the 21st season of American Pickers went on without him, fans began to wonder what was going on. Then, in July 2021, Mike Wolfe made it clear Frank wasn't coming back. Mike made a statement saying he'd miss Frank and wished him the best. But strangely, Frank didn't buy it. In an interview, he called Mike's words hollow and dropped a news that stunned fans. Throughout his entire rehab, Mike had never once called to check on him. Decades of working together and not a single phone call. Frank made it clear that their friendship had never been as close as people thought. On screen, they had chemistry, but off-screen, things were different. He thought Mike had been looking for an opportunity to push him out of the show for a long time, and with Frank out of commission, that chance finally arrived. Fans were shocked. They had been traveling, laughing, and making a popular show together for years. How could they just break up like that? As expected, there were a lot of arguments on the internet. Some people said Mike was to blame for not being there for Frank, while others said Frank's personal problems were the real reason he left. As Frank spoke, Mike replied that everyone on the show cared about him, and that getting him back on track had not been easy. As always, the truth was more complex than any one story. Later, a friend of both men said that they were both worn out from working together for years, putting in long hours and dealing with the stress of keeping a hit show going. Frank was having health problems and other problems in his personal life, which made the cracks in their bond obvious. The friend said that both men just needed room and a break from the daily grind that they had been doing for over 10 years. When you think about it, this wasn't just one moment of betrayal or a big mess-up. It was about 2 longtime co-workers who had grown apart after years of working together because of fame, stress, and personal problems. It was hard for fans to take. It seemed like Frank be a team, but things didn't work out that way in real life. Frank stayed very active in the world of antiques, even after he stopped working on TV. He knew that people were changing how they gathered. As more people shopped online, he changed with the times by opening his own online store and connecting with fans all over the world through social media. Not being relevant wasn't important to Frank. The point was to keep the picking spirit alive in a new age. Even though Frank loved old things, his other favorite thing was riding motorbikes. He has loved bikes since he was a child. A 1964 Harley-Davidson was one of his first big purchases. It probably made his parents nervous, but it made him love old bikes even more. He built up a huge collection of rare and classic bikes over the years, enough to fill a whole barn. Yet he didn't just gather them, he also taught others what he knew. He wrote a book called How to Pick Vintage Motorcycles in 2013 that explained everything from how to find secret gems to how to keep old bikes in good shape. He even put in a part about old toy motorcycles, which showed that he liked collecting more than just big things. It was about the little things, how well they were made, and the stories behind each one. In addition to his own collection, Frank made it a point to help other people who liked antiques. He worked with other experts to put on antique fairs, shows, and live events that brought together collectors and sellers who shared his interest. He also wrote The American Picker's Guide to Picking with Another Person, which gives fans a more in-depth look into the world of picking. Frank was unique not only because he could spot a good find, but also because he made history fun to read. His stories about old things, like a rusty gas pump or a lost toy from the 1950s, made them come to life. He saw picking as more than just buying and selling things. It was a way to keep stories alive, one gem at a time. There was a tragedy that changed everything. Most people thought that his fight with Mike would last for years. Frank's life took a terrible turn in July 2022. He had a big stroke at his Iowa home in Davenport. When help got there, he wasn't responding and things were getting very bad. He was taken to the hospital right away and doctors worked hard to stabilize him, but the harm was too great. Fans had been nervously waiting for news about him for years, hoping he would make it through. He spent almost a month in the hospital before being moved to a rehab center to begin the long, hard road to recovery. You don't just fall down after having a stroke. It can take away everything you thought was safe. Frank had been touring the country, making deals and living his life on his own terms for years, so suddenly needing help with simple things was a cruel truth. He could no longer take care of himself, so the court had to step in and choose a guardian to take care of his daily needs, and a bank to keep an eye on his money. He could no longer be independent, which was something he had always valued. The cost was another thing. It was said that his hospital bills added up to $29,000 a month, which made it very clear how much he had lost. One thing that didn't go as planned, though, was how the stroke changed things between him and Mike. No one saw what was going to happen in May 2023. Frank asked to see Mike. They finally sat down together after years of being apart. Being angry and not talking, a friend who was there later said it made them feel sad. Both men were crying. Mike said something to Frank that really hit home. No one else could ever take his place. It wasn't about the show, the business, or who was right or wrong for the first time in years. It was about the bond they had made before American Pickers even existed. There were only two guys, and they loved the hunt, taking back roads, discovering lost riches, and sharing a dream. Even after everything, the link was still there. It may have been buried under years of anger, but it was never really broken. Through September 2024, Frank's health had broken down. His body was too weak to fight anymore after years of being sick. His close friends and family knew that the end was near. Mike didn't think twice when the call came. He ran to help Frank and joined Frank's mother and a close family friend. Things they hadn't said or thought were heavy in the room, like the weight of everything they had been through. Things had been tough between Frank and Mike for years, but that moment, it didn't matter. The only thing that was left was their real bond. Away from the cameras and the news, after the fact, Mike said that he was holding Frank's hand when he died. His words were soft and sweet. "I love you, I forgive you, and everything is okay." Frank was gone in an instant. Frank's last words, which were both scary and important, hung in the air before he died. "The past is always with us. It lurks in the dark and is always with us." Those words almost seemed poetic coming from a man who had spent his whole life finding lost riches. His family and friends still think about him and wonder what he was thinking when he died. Frank's death record says that he died because of problems that came up after he had a stroke. He also had aortic stenosis, a disease that made even the simplest things like walking, breathing, and standing very hard for him. His body had been through a lot and was fighting the whole time, but it finally gave up. But even though his death marked the end of an age, what was found in his estate afterward was so shocking that not even the people who knew him best could believe it. It was clear that Frank loved bikes, but what not many people knew was how big his collection had grown. When his garage doors were finally opened after he died, what was inside shocked even the people who knew him best. There were rows and rows of old bikes in the room. Some had been carefully fixed up and were shining in the lights, while others were covered in dust and waiting for their chance to shine again. A lot of work had gone into collecting these rare Indian bikes, classic Harley-Davidsons, and custom choppers over the years. There was a passion that never went away, because some bikes had been fully fixed up while others were still in pieces in the middle of a job. Frank saw these as more than just tools. It was a way for him to remember fun times and show how much he loved the art of picking. He looked for them all over the country and spent years fixing them up, and clung to them like priceless artifacts from the past. For people who knew how much they meant to him, the thought of them being sold is almost like crazy. However, reports say that an auction is already planned, one in which every bike, old sign, and carefully kept piece of history will be sold during the auction. But now comes the part that no one saw coming. The money will not be put into a business or private estate fund. They will be given to charity instead, changing Frank's lifelong interest into one last act of kindness.